This is my presentation on newspapers from around the world. Uh, for my newspaper, I have selected the country of India, and I chose India Express. It was on that list of newspaper links that you gave to us. Um, I thought it would be an interesting country to do since I have not that much knowledge of India. I, even know people from India relatively well, and I just have no idea any of the culture or just even geography of that location. So I thought I could learn something from doing this. Um, so I figured there would be lots of like stuff that I just didn't know, like nouns and cultural context. So I figured that would be interesting for this assignment, and I was also just kind of genuinely curious to learn more about the country because it's a very diverse and spread out land, and I thought it would be an interesting perspective to have. Uh, so in regards to intelligibility issues, the biggest thing is, the nouns that I didn't understand, where it was just there would be something written there, and I just genuinely would not even have an idea where to begin with that. I had no idea that turmeric and haldi were synonymous. And I also didn't know what Allah was. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, to be honest. And it seems to be like a numerical value. I'm not even sure if it necessarily means money, but generally people relate it to money. And when it's converted to USDS, it's about 1,500. But it's more just a unit of measure used in India in general, from what I was getting from my research. Nupital, I didn't know was another word to call a wedding. And the caste system, I had an idea of what that was, but I didn't have like a very thorough understanding of that, so I decided I would include that as well. Um, in regards to comprehensibility issues, obviously it's an idea of just like kind of failing to understand like the structure of the things that you're reading. I did a lot of rereading of this article, this paragraph that I've listed specifically. I'm not sure if it was just the way that they conveyed the information or the order that they chose to select it in, but I found myself not knowing what the relationships between all of these parties were. Like, I didn't understand who was in control or who was being subjected to what punishments, and then, like, at one point I believed that she was remarrying into the family that had basically ostracized her, which I thought was really strange. And I had to go back and reread that a couple times before I realized that it was more just that was a party that was in power, and now she had like their blessing, which she didn't originally have. In regards to interpretability issues, I didn't really have a perspective or necessarily context for a lot of these things. Um, there were lots of bigger names listed that I'm assuming were cultural icons of India that I just didn't recognize. So when they would drop these names and just be like, "Oh, here was this rationalist Narendra Davulkar," and I don't have any context to that. I don't know what he stood for. I don't know why or how he was killed. And they even had that like a speaker related to him at their wedding, and I had no context to that. Also, when they were describing like regional areas of India, I just didn't know where those were, what they looked like, or anything along those lines. So that made some of understanding context difficult as well. I also, um, that's about it actually. In reflection, I realized that I do, as I assumed, have very little knowledge of India, especially its cultures. Um, and so it's definitely something that I learned as I was reading this. Given the way that I speak and use my L1 English, I probably make it very, very difficult for people who use even other countries that use English to just understand me. I would say that one of my larger issues is probably comprehensibility because, or rather intelligibility, because I use tons of slang that people aren't necessarily going to know. And then in regards to comprehensibility, a lot of times I will drop words out of sentences or just assume that people will pick up what I understood by context clues rather than giving them all of the information that is technically necessary. And then interpretability is kind of a strange concept that I was struggling with. And I think ultimately what it's come down to is it's more like understanding the depth or true meaning behind the words someone's trying to get across. One last thing that I noticed was at one point they used the word torture, which I directly associate with like instrumented intentional abuse, whereas they used it around twice in this article in a sense that it was like just like a really intense period of suffering rather than like intentionally inflicted with devices. And so it's not necessarily, uncommon to hear that in my usage of English either, but I thought it was interesting that in other countries, given context, some words that we would use only in different contexts can blend and meld like that. Overall, I thought it was interesting, especially since I read some other articles too. I just selected this one since it seemed like the one I could talk about the most. But yeah, that's basically it. I hope you enjoy.